Hey class, for math in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be learning about fractions. Now you might be thinking in your head, why do we have to learn about fractions? Well, I'm glad you asked, because fractions are everywhere. Fractions, they're everywhere. I hope I have enough iron. Let's see, my chest plate, a little bit short. Fractions, they're everywhere. Fractions, they're everywhere. Fractions, they're everywhere. Fractions, they're everywhere. Can I have change for $1, please?
Sure.
Thanks. Fractions, they're everywhere. Fractions, they're everywhere. So as you see, class, fractions are... In just a bit, you're going to watch a video lesson from Rob from Math Antics on fraction basics. I'll see you in a bit.
If you've been learning math for a while, then you probably already know a thing or two about fractions. And if you've ever had to, well, break a cookie in half to share with a friend, well, then you've used fractions in real life. Oh, well, thank you. That's because fractions are used to represent smaller pieces or parts of things. When you're first learning about fractions, it can help to draw pictures to see how they work. So let's start by drawing a circle. Now this circle represents what we call a hole. Now, not the kind of hole you can fall into, more like a whole cookie or a whole pizza. Now if we divide that circle or whole amount into 4 parts, then we call each of those parts a fraction of the original whole circle. Because this is math and not art, we can't just keep on drawing pictures. We need to learn how to write out fractions using the language of math. Yep, you guessed it. That means using numbers. Unlike a regular number, to write a fraction you need 2 numbers. One number on top, one number on bottom, and a line between them. I'll explain exactly what the line's for later in the video. But for now, let's figure out what those 2 numbers mean. Remember, fractions are used to represent parts of something. And the number on the bottom tells us how many parts that something is divided into. The number on top tells us how many of those parts we have. For example, let's write a fraction for our drawing here. I divided the circle into 4 parts, right? So the number on the bottom will be 4. And I still have all 4 of those parts, so the number on top will also be 4. I have 4 out of 4 parts. That means I still have a whole circle. But what if somebody came by and took away 1 part from the circle? Well, the circle's still divided into 4 parts, so the bottom number would still be 4. But I only have 3 of those parts left. So that means the top number will change to 3. So I have 3 over 4, or 3/4 of a circle. Make sense so far? Good. Let's try another example. Let's say that I divide a rectangle up into 8 parts, and I give you 3 of those parts. Since the total number of parts is 8, the bottom number will be 8. And since you have 3 of those parts, the top number will be 3. So the fraction I'm giving you is 3 over 8, or 3/8 of the rectangle. No need to think. Oh, and it's important to remember that for fractions to work right, the parts that you divide the whole up into have to be equal. We can't take a candy bar and say, well, I'm going to divide it into 2 parts, so this is your half, and here's my half. Let's look at a few more examples so you can really see the pattern of how fractions can represent parts of objects. This rectangle is divided up into 3 equal parts, and 2 of them are shaded red. So 2 over 3, or 2/3 of the rectangle, is shaded red. The circle is divided into 12 equal parts, and 7 of those parts are shaded green. So 7 over 12, or 7/12 of the circle, is shaded green. The hexagon is divided into 6 equal parts, and 5 of those parts are shaded blue. So 5 over 6, or 5/6 of the hexagon, is shaded blue. All right, so you can see how fractions can be used to represent parts of objects like circles and rectangles, but fractions can be used for more than that. They can be used to represent parts of, well, anything, like pets, for example. Let's say you have 7 pets, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and a big fat hamster. Well, that means that 4 over 7, or 4/7 of your pets are dogs, and 2 over 7, or 2/7 of your pets are cats, and 1 over 7, or 1/7 of your pets are hamsters. It also means that your house probably smells like a pet store. Okay, so fractions can be used to represent anything from parts of a circle to kitty cats. But did you know that fractions can also be used to represent things you can't even see? Well, like a test score, for example. Let's say you take a math test and there's 20 questions on the test, and you get 17 of those questions right. That means that you got 17 over 20, or 17/20ths of the questions right. All right, so that's the basic idea of how fractions can be used to represent parts of things. But there's a lot more to fractions than that. In the next section, we're going to be looking at some of the other things we can do with fractions. But before that, let's review. Fractions are used to represent parts of a whole. Fractions are written in the form of a top number over a bottom number with a line between them. The bottom number represents how many parts the whole is divided into, and the top number represents how many of those parts you have. And finally, the parts that a whole is divided up into must be equal for fractions to work right. To really understand how fractions are used to represent parts of things, be sure to do the exercises. And I'll see you in section 2.
Okay, so far we've learned how fractions represent parts of things, and we've learned how to do some simple math with those parts. But if we want to really understand how fractions work, we need to start thinking about them in a new way. We need to learn what fractions really are. A fraction is just a number that's written like a division problem. You remember division, right? Where you take one number and divide it up by another number? And you might also remember that there's different ways to write a division problem. When you first learn about division, you usually see division problems written like this. Now that symbol in the middle just means divide this number by that number. Then you learn it's useful to write a division problem a different way, like this. Now that's still the same division problem. It just uses a different symbol to tell us to divide. So that's 2 different ways to write the same division problem. But wait, there's more. Now some of you who use computers a lot might have seen division written like this. Now that slash is just another way to write the division symbol. Now this one's interesting. Watch what happens when we rearrange it a little bit. Look familiar? Yep, it's a division problem that looks like a fraction. And that's just because a fraction really is a division problem, but we treat it like a number. The line between the top and bottom numbers is just another way of writing the division symbol. The top number is the number being divided up, and we call it the numerator. The bottom number is the number we're dividing by, and we call it the denominator. Now let's look at some of the common fractions that you're already familiar with and think of them as division problems. For example, 1/2, or 1 over 2, is really just 1 divided by 2. The fraction 2/3, or 2 over 3, really means 2 divided by 3. And the fraction 3/4, or 3 over 4, really means 3 divided by 4. Thinking about fractions like little division problems might seem strange to some of you, especially because these division problems show smaller numbers being divided by larger numbers. You may not have seen that before. You might not have even thought it was possible, but you can divide a smaller number by a bigger one. It just means that the answer you get is going to be smaller than 1. If the idea of dividing a smaller number by a bigger one seems confusing to you, don't worry. It's going to make a lot more sense. Let's review what we've learned so far. This section was short, but in it, we learned the most important thing there is to know about fractions. We learned that fractions are numbers that are written like division problems. The line between the top and bottom numbers is another form of the division symbol. That tells you to divide the top number by the bottom number. The top number is called the numerator, and the bottom number is called the denominator. It might be a new idea to you, but you can divide a smaller number by a bigger number. This was a really important concept we covered, so be sure to do the exercises before you move on. Learn more at mathantics.com.
All right, class. Now that lesson is over, I want you to think about, in the beginning of the video, of all the different scenarios I was in. I was playing Pokemon at one time, I was starting a car, I was baking, I was doing Minecraft, looking at a player's card, all kinds of things. So go back in the video and think about, how are fractions involved with those things? And your assignment is to come tomorrow prepared to share with your peers and with me how are fractions used in those circumstances. I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. I'll see you tomorrow.